Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into the fascinating and often frustrating world of narcissism. Specifically, we're going to break down the difference between the narcissist's carefully constructed false self and their often hidden true self. Whether you've dealt with a narcissist personally or you're just trying to wrap your head around this complex personality disorder, understanding this key difference is crucial. We'll explore how this duality shapes their relationships, their actions, and ultimately, their own happiness. Let's get started. Alright, before we can dissect the false self and the true self, we gotta make sure we're all on the same page about what narcissism really is. See, it's not just about someone who loves themselves a little too much or can't stop staring in the mirror. Narcissism, clinically speaking, is a personality disorder. That means it's a deeply ingrained pattern of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that deviate significantly from what's considered normal. We're talking about folks who have an inflated sense of their own importance, a deep need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. They might seem super confident on the outside, but deep down, there's a well of insecurity and vulnerability they desperately try to hide. This brings us to the core of our discussion today, the narcissist's two selves. The Susan Jayahosha. Now imagine this, a person wearing a mask. On the surface, they seem charming, put together, maybe even perfect. But beneath that mask, there's a whole other story going on. The false self is the carefully crafted persona the narcissist presents to the world. It's all about maintaining an image of superiority, success, and desirability. On the flip side, the true self is hidden from view. It's the part of them that holds their deepest fears, insecurities, and shame. Understanding this is key to understanding the narcissist's actions, their relationships, and their struggles. Let's talk about how this false self develops in the first place. Narcissism often stems from childhood experiences. Imagine a child who constantly felt inadequate. Maybe they had a parent who was emotionally unavailable or overly critical. Or perhaps they were neglected or even abused. These experiences can create deep wounds, leaving the child feeling fundamentally flawed and unworthy of love. To cope with this pain, the child starts constructing a false self. They create this idealized image of who they think they need to be to gain love and approval. This might involve becoming high-achieving, overly charming, or even putting others down to feel superior. It's a fragile construction that requires constant validation and reinforcement to stay intact. So, how does this false self actually play out in the narcissist's life? Well, you'll often see a pattern of behaviors designed to protect and maintain that carefully crafted image. First and foremost, narcissists crave admiration. They need constant praise and validation to prop up their fragile egos. Think about that friend who always has to one-up your story, or the coworker who constantly needs to be the center of attention. Then there's the sense of entitlement. Narcissists often believe they're special, rules don't apply to them, and they deserve special treatment. And let's not forget about the manipulation. To keep that false self afloat, narcissists become masters of manipulation. Now, here's the thing about the false self. It can't handle criticism. Remember, it's built on a foundation of insecurity and shame. So any perceived threat to that carefully constructed image can trigger intense reactions. Imagine someone questioning a narcissist's accomplishments, challenging their beliefs, or, God forbid, rejecting them. This can feel like a direct attack on their very being, and they'll go to great lengths to defend themselves. You might see rage, denial, blame shifting, anything to deflect the blow and avoid confronting the painful truth that lies beneath. They're often so caught up in protecting their false self that they're unable to see the needs or feelings of others. This constant need to defend and protect their false self comes at a high cost. Now, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the other side of the coin, the narcissist's true self. While the false self is loud and demanding, the true self is quiet, hidden, and often deeply wounded. It's the part of them that holds all the vulnerabilities, the insecurities, and the shame that they so desperately try to keep hidden from the world, and often from themselves. Imagine a tiny, fragile seed buried deep beneath layers of rock and soil. That seed represents the narcissist's true self. It has the potential for growth, for connection, for genuine self-love, but it's buried so deep, so weighed down by the fear of being seen and rejected, that it struggles to break free. The narcissist often avoids acknowledging their true self at all costs. So, where does this deep-seated shame and insecurity come from? Well, in many cases, the roots of the true self can be traced back to childhood experiences. Now, remember, not every child who experiences hardship becomes a narcissist. But for those who do, the impact of early trauma, neglect, or abuse can be profound. Imagine a child who grew up with a parent who was emotionally unavailable, constantly critical, or even abusive. This child learns from a young age that love is conditional, that they have to be perfect or achieve great things to be worthy of attention and affection. These experiences can leave deep scars, creating a sense that they are inherently flawed and unworthy of love. As a result, the child develops a defense mechanism, the false self. Now, here's the real tragedy of the narcissist's true self. It often remains frozen in time, while the false self might be out there conquering the world, seeking admiration and validation. The true self is stuck in a perpetual state of longing and unworthiness. They might crave genuine connection, intimacy, and love, but their fear of vulnerability, their terror of being exposed as flawed or unworthy, keeps them trapped in a prison of their own making. It's a vicious cycle. The more they try to outrun their true self, the more deeply entrenched it becomes. Okay, so we've got these two distinct identities battling it out within the narcissist. The false self, hungry for admiration and control, and the true self, longing for authenticity and connection, but terrified of exposure. Imagine a tug of war going on inside their mind. On one side, you've got this powerful, charismatic false self, pulling strings, seeking validation, and demanding the spotlight. On the other side, there's this timid, wounded true self, whispering doubts, craving genuine intimacy, but too afraid to step into the light. The problem is, the false self has a vice grip on the reins. It's loud, it's demanding, and it's determined to stay in control. The true self, on the other hand, is often silenced, dismissed, and denied. This constant internal conflict takes a toll. Now, this internal battle between the false self and the true self, it doesn't stay confined to the narcissist's mind. It spills out into their relationships, creating a real mess for everyone involved. How can you build a genuine, healthy relationship when you're constantly hiding who you really are? When you're more focused on maintaining an image than on connecting on a deeper level? The narcissist's need for control, their fear of vulnerability, their inability to empathize, it creates a dynamic where their partners, friends, and family members often feel used, manipulated, and emotionally drained. They might get glimpses of that wounded true self, those moments of vulnerability that offer a glimmer of hope for a real connection. But just as quickly, the false self swoops in, building walls, deflecting blame, and reinforcing that emotional distance. And you know what the saddest part is? This whole charade, this elaborate dance between the false self and the true self, it doesn't even bring the narcissist any real happiness. Sure, they might experience fleeting moments of satisfaction from external validation, from achieving success, or from manipulating others to get their way. But deep down, beneath that carefully constructed facade, there's a profound sense of emptiness. They're trapped in this cycle of seeking external validation to fill an internal void that can never truly be filled. The very defenses they've built to protect themselves from pain end up perpetuating their suffering. So, we've talked about the narcissist's two selves, this constant battle between the false self and the true self, and the havoc it can wreak on their lives and relationships. But now the big question: can a narcissist change? The answer, my friends, is complicated. It's not a simple yes or no. Change is possible, but it's incredibly difficult, and it requires a perfect storm of factors to align. First and foremost, the narcissist has to want to change. I'm talking about a deep, soul-level recognition that their current way of being is causing them pain and that they're tired of living behind a mask. This kind of self-awareness is rare for narcissists. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and vulnerability to even begin to chip away at that armor. We've covered a lot of ground today, folks. We've explored the depths of narcissism, unmasking the false self, and shedding light on the wounded true self. It's a complex disorder, often rooted in deep-seated pain and insecurity. Understanding this duality is key to navigating interactions with a narcissist. You can't change them or force them to develop empathy. Focus on protecting yourself. Set healthy boundaries and prioritize your well-being. You deserve relationships where you feel loved and valued. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time, take care.